Hey there, thanks for watching. This is part two of my history with God and the church, my relationship with God and the church. Because part one ended up being a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm happy to talk about that. And looking forward to sharing sort of the next chapter because that goes from sort of my adulthood to present day, in which I spent 10 years in, am spending 10 years in the same church. And I got stories, and I'm naming names because why the heck not? And you'll see actually some of these names come into play because my channel's been on for 5 years and I've been going to that church for 10 years. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about has happened while I've had my channel up and running. So that was kind of happening in the background. I couldn't talk about it at the time, but guess what? Statute of limitations is passed. I'm talking about it. Okay, so this is going to be for the past 10 years, so 09, 08, 09 to present day. And my history with this church, All Souls Community Church in Suffern, New York. So and the reason this relates to my channel is because tithing and giving to this church is so very, very, very important to me and my financial well-being. Because I view everything I have as coming from God, and nothing I have belongs to me. Not my health, not my relationships, not my mind, not my strength. Nothing I have is from mine. I believe that everything I have is a gift of God, whether I view it in present day as good or bad. It's all from God. So, and this video is going to relate specifically to my time in this church and why I think that that's one of the most wonderful, awful, terrible, magnificent, triumphant things that I've ever experienced, because it is, and it's really been a challenge. So when I left off in part one, I had just walked into a church kind of after seeking, called Grace Redeemer in Teaneck, New Jersey, and the assistant pastor was a man that I had gone to church with previously, and he knew me. He remembered my mom. My mom was kind of in the young adults group that he was part of when he married his wife, however many, like 10 years ago, 10 years prior to that. So it was a neat sort of coincidence, and I want to say like providential meeting. So I went to that church. I got to know him. I ended up babysitting his kids and found out that he was going to start a new church in Rockland County. And he actually, so he, like, my mom would come to, and we would go together, and we wouldn't actually go together because at that point, like, I wanted nothing. I was like, you do your thing, Mom, I'll do my thing. But he actually went after her, my mom, to be part of his church because was part of the community, the demographic that he was looking for. I don't want to say it like that, but like, she's an older white lady, and they had a lot of young Asian families, but they wanted some like older sort of like stability in the community. And I think that that's super important. And the thing that I so valued about this church, Grace Baptist in Nanuet, that I knew this pastor from, is that it was so diverse in terms of age, socioeconomic station, ethnically, racially. There were so many. It was so diverse, and I think that that's sort of why I love the church that I'm at right now. So spoiler alert, going back to that, this was before he started that church, All Souls Community Church, and it was kind of still in the planning phases. He specifically went after my mom and was like, I would love you to come to be a part of our core church members. So she's like, sure. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, because I was actually also working overseas at the time, so I would come back, and I really wasn't able to be part of that group, but I was happy that she was there and she was able to be a part of launching that church. And I remember their first meeting. I was at the first meeting, and it was kind of that whole year we met in the classroom, actually in Grace Baptist, in the upstairs, sitting on like metal folding chairs in a circle looking at each other. And there were maybe 10 people all in a circle. Our attendance today is around 180 to 200 people. So that's where we are now. And it's not easy. So let me kind of talk about, I don't know how, because chronologically, I guess, makes sense, but I want to kind of go over that this has not been easy. And I don't know if it's ever easy for someone to just walk into a church. That it's always sort of, it's not easy, but it's always good. So I'll put it that way. And I state again that sometimes the worst part of church can be the people in it, and I'm in it. So, I can constantly be thinking, how am I being the love of God today? And in this church specifically. So let me back up 8 years to when I first started going to this church pretty seriously. And And there are always kind of going to be social issues in any group anywhere. I don't care if it's a meeting, of the Atheist Society, or, if it's Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, there are always going to be community challenges whenever a community gets together. So as I was coming back from teaching overseas and looking to transition more into life here in the States, it was tough to find a group of friends that I could really connect with. There's always that, who's going to go out for lunch, and who's invited and who's not invited, and who wants to hang out and who doesn't want to hang out, who do you not want to hang out with. So there was a little bit of that going on in the beginning, and it took some time for me to settle in. I would say by time, I mean, it's 8 years later, and I'm just kind of now getting around to it. But in that time, I think what would have been really helpful is to say, you just be secure in yourself and don't worry about what other people think. Just don't worry about whether people want to hang out with you or not, or whether you want to hang out with them. Just kind of take it at to let things roll off you that aren't important. But I will say kind of how I got involved. Exactly. One of the biggest things I did was I volunteered my time and my energy. I was kind of looking for steady employment at that time, and I had some time on my hands. So what I did was there was, when we were meeting, so we met in the basement of that Grace Baptist Church before we actually had a building. And there was a group kind of meeting afterwards, and it was like a retreat planning meeting. And because they'd mentioned it in service. And this is maybe my third time after I'd come back from overseas. I didn't really know people, but I knew I wanted to know people. So I just walked up to the woman who looked like she was heading the committee, and she's like, "Yes, can I help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to, I want to volunteer." And she's like, "Oh, well then come on in." So that was a great way that I kind of got to know people, was by volunteering. And that kind of helped me to get connected with people that I could get to know and sort of build in, because I feel like that has been the most valuable thing in going through challenging times or times of transition, is having people who know you externally and who can say, this is true about you and this is true, and I've seen you do this. People who aren't invested. For example, when I was looking for a job, the church wasn't the place that I went to look for a job. The church was a place that I went to for encouragement as I was looking for a job. So I would be encouraged by the people in church, and then I would go out the rest of the week and send out my resumes and go on my calls and improve my skills and do things like that. So it wasn't like I was hitting up people at church for jobs. I was saying, hey, can you give me some advice? Can you give me some encouragement? What would you think? So I was bouncing things off of them. I wasn't saying, hey, can you find me a job? No, that's my job is to do the work. I look to the church for support and encouragement. So that was sort of how it's been super helpful, and how I kind of got to know people over that amount of time. And that the way that I was able to do that was by just committing to do it. I've been in this area for the past 10 years plus, as an adult, and it's just that day in and day out making a commitment to go every single Sunday, no matter what you feel, no matter the issues you've had with this person, or this person said something that hurt your feelings, or you didn't like what this person did. Yes, that it hurts your feelings sometimes. Sometimes people say things that hurt your feelings, sure. Roll with it. Go anyway. Do it anyway. So one of the best pieces of advice I got from our music director was, a music director at Grace Baptist, the church I attended previous, was, he was coaching a choir rehearsal, and it was 2 people had solos, me and another girl, and she was like, Dave, I just don't feel like singing today. And he's like, that's okay. You don't have to feel like singing. You just have to do it. This is a life lesson. I was 8, 10 at the time, and I'm like, this is a life lesson. You don't have to feel like it. You just have to do it. And I find myself returning to that, those words of wisdom every now and then. I'm like, I don't have to feel like it. I just have to do it. So that's really kind of been helpful in my church journey. So it's 2019, and the reason I'm doing this on a Sunday is because I just came from that church, and the story that we've went through, just some amazing, incredible challenges, but also triumphs, because we didn't have a building 5 years ago. I think we just moved into this building 5 years ago, and it's a gorgeous stone structure that we actually got acquired from another church. They, in order to give us the building, they had to break away from the church that they were, the Presbyterian division that they were in, and come join us. And again, it was money. It was money and property. The division that they were part of did not want to let them go because they had this building. So it was big, and it was kind of hairy, but we came through it. So I'll tell you what happened just this Sunday, because the past 2 Sundays have been really, really encouraging, and I have felt really affirmed in my decision to sort of stick it out. Because I've had so many different personality clashes, and like it was an interesting sort of experience to look out, because some people that hadn't been coming regularly came regularly this Sunday, and I was like, that's interesting. Because I kind of looked at it and was like, that didn't work out. This person said this and I didn't like it. The pastor said that and I didn't like it. They said that and this family did this. But you know what? Like, despite that all, God is still God, and he is good all the time. I might not be able to see that goodness, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is good. So, and like our pastor says, so I became a member 4 years ago. I went through the class and I did the whole, they have you stand up on stage and take these vows of membership, and it's kind of a really like a neat sort of ceremony. And just in we recently inducted new members, and the pastor said, you don't become a member when you take these vows. You become a member the first time someone hurts your feelings, and you stay anyway. And I'm like, yes, that is very true, because the pastor has hurt my feelings like several times. Several times. There have been several times, and not on purpose, but like, he will say things. He's very provocative, and he will say things, provocative, charismatic, anointed, just he's all those things rolled into one. He will say provocative things on purpose, and there have been times when I wanted to punch him, because I'm like, you knew that would hurt, and you knew that, and he said things that have kind of been inappropriate to other people as well, and I think he knows that, and sometimes he'll like push the envelope, and sometimes he'll move back. We've lost people over it. People come because of it. So it's like a give and take, bearing with each other. But on the whole, I appreciate him so much, and I appreciate the sacrifice that he's made to be in that position, because it has not been easy for him or his family. So what happened over these past 2 weeks? So last week I helped out in the confirmation class, and that's one of the things I love to do so much, because these are like 5th graders, and I realize that this church that I'm in right now is a church that I would have loved to attend when I was like in 8th grade through high school. Like, this is a church I dreamed of, because I look out and our church is so diverse. We have people from Ghana, India, Addis Ababa, China. It's amazing to see the diversity. We have young people, old people, young families, older families, multi-generational people in our church, and it's a wonder. So I love being in confirmation class, because I want to engage with those kids the way that I felt engaged with. And so they're in 5th grade, and they're starting to ask questions, and I'm like, well, what about this? And what about this? We were doing the Lord's Prayer, and so there's 6 petitions or something like that. It's a catechism. It's a very sort of regulated, structured catechism, which I personally love. I was not taught the Lord's Prayer like that. I wish I had been. And they knew the answers, and they were talking about, so the petition was, thy will be done. And so the main teacher was this guy who's, in his 80s. He's a physician. He's just got this learned, like really wise way about him. So he has 5 daughters, 4 daughters, and I'm good friends with his youngest. And he was talking about like the will of God and submitting your way to the will of God. And I'm like, guys, like, yes, George can tell you like, this is amazing, but I can, this is a good way to live your life. And I'm like, I can also tell you it's fun. Like, it's fun and exciting to harness your life to the will of God and to submit your way to the will of God, because you never know what's going to happen. Like, you just never know. It's surprising, and it's exciting, and it's wonderful, because you never know. Sometimes it can be a little bit nerve-wracking and harrowing, because you never know. But you always know, if you're in the will of God, that you're attached to something larger than yourself. And that in itself is wonderful and exciting. So I was helping out in confirmation class, and I had this idea of like submitting your ways to the Lord, because on the topic of things not working out, that church is full of things that didn't work out for me the way I had thought. Specifically, in regard to relationships with men. I'm a single woman, and I really want to get married. And I've been that way the 10 years that I've been there. And it's been challenging, because there are some really, really great single guys. That's it. And it's been a challenge to negotiate still attending when maybe things don't work out, when for sure things don't work out the way that you had wanted them to work out. So that's it's kind of all I'll say about that. I was going to say more, but I'm not going to. I could do a whole video on that, like when things don't work out in the church. But that's not the purpose of this channel, because I don't think that that so much relates to my experience. I will say that it is a joy and a privilege to, especially with the kids, to be able to interact with kids and teenagers too, like when they're on that's like sort of cusp. Like I never thought that I would relate to being to teenagers, because I hated being a teenager, but now that I've known these kids, like there have been some kids that have been with us for all 10 years. One of our elders has two daughters, and they were, I want to say 6 and 4 when they started, and they're 14 and 16 going on 17 now, 17, and just applying to colleges. And like I've known them for those 10 years. Like I've known, I've been in their lives, and I'm like that I can relate to. And the sermon today was on prayer, and I just said we came in a little bit late, and I like slid in, and my mom went in another direction, and I sat with the elder's daughter, and her name's Olivia, and she's amazing. She sings with the choir, and so the sermon was on prayer, and the pastor was saying something. He said, prayer always works. And I looked at Olivia and I'm like, yes, it does. Not always the way you would want, but it always works. And we kind of like shared a laugh on that. And I feel like that kind of interaction would not have been able to happen any other way than had her father been faithful and brought their family in the midst of, social challenges and whatnot, because they're a very liberal family in a very conservative church. And he has persevered for them, and I so appreciate that. It wouldn't have been able to happen without him making that commitment, and I wouldn't have been able to be a part of that unless I had made the commitment to show up every single week, whether or not I felt like it. So I just, in that moment, I was like, oh, like I really I so appreciate that relationship. And the people, there's like an old guard that sits like off to the left. My mom sat with them. And these are people that had been with the original church that was in that building, who are maybe in their 60s and 70s, and who have kids my age, and their kids have moved away, gone on with their lives. But they'll check in with me and be like, like, how are you doing? What's going on? And it feels so, I feel really purposeful to be sort of on both sides, to have the wisdom and to be able to support someone. To support and to be supported is just, that's a gift beyond measure. So when people ask me about tithing, and when people make comments about tithing, that's why I tithe, so that connections like that can happen, and that people can support and feel supported. It's for my own benefit. It's very, very selfish, because that has been the single most important thing in my life over these past 10 years. That has been the relationship that has sustained me more than anything else. The Spirit of Christ through the church. So that's kind of a long history of my relationship with God and my relationship to the church. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, I love talking about this. So if you want to know more, please let me know in the comments. If you have anything you want me to answer, I would love to. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll keep watching.